For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started. Hey guys, this is Standing for Truth. There is so much evidence for a worldwide flood. Raw Matt and I are thrilled that people are loving our video on the new flood model. Everybody who hasn't seen it yet, please refer to that video because it is a must watch. This video that you are about to watch consists of portions of Nephilim-free and my debate against evolutionists and uniformitarians, Snake was right, and emotionally stunted emoticon. Snake was right, and ESE were in impossible positions trying to defend a position of uniformitarianism. You will see in this video evidence presented by myself and Nephilim-free through our opening statements, followed by the discussion portion of this debate. It is a must watch, this portion. It really shows the strength of the global flood model and just how hard it really is to defend a uniformitarian view. Now, I do recommend watching this entire debate in its entirety. It's about 2 hours long. That way, you can also watch the evolutionists' opening statements and all of the various rebuttal rounds that we had. It was a very fast-paced, very engaging debate. There's also a playlist on Standing for Truth where you can watch various debates between creationists who are defending the global flood model and uniformitarians. I recommend this highly because once again, it really shows just how strong of a model and just how strong of a belief it is to hold to the Genesis flood. Guys, enjoy the video.
Well, what best explains the fossil record? The global flood of Noah, of course. When we start with God's word as our final authority, that authoritative eyewitness account of, say, Earth's history, the history of the universe, the fossil record is absolutely consistent with the global cataclysmic Genesis flood. It explains numerous things that we see. For example, we see rock layers with marine fossils covering the continents, which is obviously a result of a global flood. Unimaginable numbers of plant and animal fossils are found in extensive graveyards where they had to be buried rapidly on a massive scale. Billions and billions of these fossils. Often the fossil remains are found in the famous death pose. But first of all, what do we find in the fossil record? Let's take a look at the fossil record itself, guys. Over 95% of all fossils are shallow marine organisms, such as corals and shellfish. 95% of the remaining 5% are algae and plants. 95% of the remaining 0.25% are invertebrates, including insects. Now, the remaining 0.0125% are vertebrates, mostly fish. 95% of land vertebrates consist of less than one bone, and 95% of mammal fossils are from the Ice Age after the flood. That's why when the evolutionists look to lining up specific fossils to prove their evolutionary theory, a lot of times they're cherry picking on such limited data. The fact is, each basic plant and animal type appeared abruptly and fully functional, and they experienced stasis throughout its existence. Each type was complex and distinct right from the start. Now, at the end of the day, many of the Earth's fossil-bearing layers, they stretch over entire continents. Some of the sandstone layers, for example, in North America, reach from California to New England. Numerous peculiar fossils have been found that defy a tranquil fossilization event. For example, we see an ichthyosaur mother in the process of giving birth. It was preserved in the rock layers. It doesn't take millions and millions of years to give birth, my friends. It's difficult, very difficult to imagine that these creatures froze in position, slowly sank to the ocean bottom, and then were slowly covered with sediment in a manner that avoided scavenging or any other type of disturbance. Instead, a rapid catastrophic burial seems much more likely. In addition to individual fossils, we now have data, plenty of data, suggesting that entire fossil beds were the result of catastrophic burial. So what the fossil record supports is massive death and burial on a global scale. This is exactly what the Bible describes. 2 Peter 3 tells us in the last days there's going to be scoffers denying three things: the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. This debate right here is fulfilled prophecy. These evolutionists here, they reject and scoff and deny all three of those things. Specifically here in this debate, the global flood. The world that then was being overflowed with water perished. The existence of a fossil is proof positive that it happened quickly. Environmental factors prevent that organism from forming, but it's covered by sediment and protected. The fossilization process can start. How much more time do I have, Matt?
1 minute.
Okay. Well, at the end of the day, I think it's pretty obvious that the fossil record in geology proved biblical creation in the Genesis flood. We see rapid or no erosion between sediment layers. We see flat, featureless boundaries. We find whole rock layer sequences deposited rapidly in quick succession. Look at the walls of the Grand Canyon, for example. From the tapetes at the bottom to the Kaibab limestone at the top, it's supposed to be representing 300 million years of slow and gradual sedimentary deposition. When the plateau was pushed up, those rock layers were bent and folded, but they were folded without fracturing. They had to be soft, of course, if they were bent without fracturing. That means they could have only just been deposited. This means the 300 million years never happened that these evolutionists believe in. Uniformitarianism is pseudoscience. All those rock layers had to be rapidly deposited in quick succession in the flood year.
15 seconds.
Awesome. You know what? I know Neff here is going to have a lot of good things to say, so I'm going to give up those 15 seconds and let my teammate here, Neff, take over. Thanks, guys.
All right, Neff. When you're ready, I'll start time.
Okay, you can begin. It is fulfilled prophecy, brother. Are you seeing what I'm sharing on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. This is a fossil of what's called an ostracod. It's a tiny, little bitty creature, a fraction of an inch long. Look at the state of preservation of this tiny, little bitty creature that will easily, you could fit numerous ones on your finger, on your pinky fingernail. It's astonishing to get a fossil of a creature this small, this incredibly well preserved. That can only happen rapidly, as my astute partner has stated. Fossilization requires heavily mineralized waters to rapidly create a fossil. A fossilization cannot take weeks, months, or years. It takes place in days, and that's it. Or you'll never get a fossil. Here's a fish. Individual cells of this fish have been preserved. It's allegedly 100 million years old. Individual cells were fossilized. Here is preserved cellular structure of a fish's gills, allegedly 100 million years old. This kind of detailed fossilization can only happen rapidly. These tissues will degrade very rapidly by the action of bacteria and scavenging, unless it happens rapidly. The conditions to create a fossil record only existed on this planet once, and that was during the flood of Noah. Only the flood of Noah can explain the geologic column. Only the flood of Noah can explain the fossil record that exists in the geologic column, because you simply cannot get fine, intricate tissues like this to become fossils over a period of months. It will not happen. It will degrade rapidly. These are individual cells that are embryos that are fossilized. The first one is one single cell. The next one is where it splits into 2 and 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. It goes from 1 cell, 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, and 16 cells. This can only happen rapidly. A single cell will degrade very rapidly in water. Osmosis alone should cause it to burst. How do you get this? Only highly mineralized water and rapid fossilization under heat could possibly explain it. So the fossil record can only be explained now by the flood. My friend touched upon the death pose. That's a beautiful thing to talk about. We find that whenever we find dinosaur fossils and large animal fossils in the fossil record, they often seem to be, very prominently often, seem to be in this called death pose. Look how this animal's neck is bent backwards, all the way back. And this one, its neck is contorted backwards. These are real fossils. Here's a fossil in sandstone, I believe. The neck is all the way back. And here's another. The heads are turned back. Here's an animal. This is a large creature, I believe a T-Rex. Look how its head is up. It's lying on its back. It didn't fall dead and lay on the ground and die. This creature was buried immediately in thick sediments, and it stuck its head up while it was choking and flailing and choking on sediments and died in sediments. It died rapidly. When a creature this large falls dead, it doesn't stick its head up. This dinosaur stuck its head straight up in the air as it's choking to death on sediments because it was rapidly buried by the flood of Noah. Here's another. The neck is bent almost all the way backward. This not only indicates the creature was struggling to breathe, but it also indicates the waters that brought the sediments that were thick and moving rapidly because it washed the animal's head and forced it backward towards the rest of its body. It was facing the oncoming flood. Here's that T-Rex. I believe it's a T-Rex. Its head stuck straight up in the air. How do you explain this with uniformitarianism? It's impossible. This gigantic creature that weighed multiple tons was choking to death on sediments and stuck its head up in the air, gasping for air, which it could not get. Its throat was filled with sediment, and it choked to death.
30 seconds.
This is because the flood of Noah is a geologic fact. There's more physical evidence for the flood of Noah than there is for anything else in all of science. Denying the flood of Noah is to deny geology. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
All right. We're jumping into the discussion portion right now. So, Stunted Emojicon and Neff. I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And we are going to jump right into this. So when you guys are ready, I will start the timer. And whoever wants to begin, go right ahead.
Okay, so it's just me and him for 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, firstly, I'll just point out that Taylor just acknowledged that the whole geologic column, the flood of Noah thing, is religious for him. He's tying it to the Garden of Eden, and says, that Precambrian fossils can be found throughout the geologic column. That's absurd. If you have sediments, thick sediments moving across the earth and the onset of the Noahic flood, there's no reason for us to believe that those creatures wouldn't be buried in situ, but be churned up and then found throughout the rest of the sediments as they built up, going upward throughout the geologic column. Taylor's ideas are absolutely bizarre.
Would you like to just do it all together? Throw them in?
Yeah, maybe.
Standing emoticon. Well,
Do we all want to just discuss together, or do you want to do?
Well, that might become chaotic. It might be good if we stuck to what we got going.
Well,
we can do like
So, standing for emoticon, I would ask you if uniformitarianism is true and the geologic flood of Noah is not true. Can you explain to me a scientific geologic process that's capable of building up the continents vertically that creates strata with clear, distinct boundaries between them? Whereas the boundary can be seen so fine that it's often paper thin between one strata and another and another and another and another, going upward, 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 upward for, in some places, 6 miles, and on an average 1,800 meters deep. How can uniformitarianism explain the geologic column, the strata with clear, distinct boundaries, instead of gradiating from one material into another? Can you explain that to me?
Right. So the gradation you're talking about would actually be expected under flood. If you witness our flood deposits things, it would actually have a gradient that would under the flood. Under a uniformitarian model, what happens is the layers would be laid down. They would either solidify or whatever, and then they may be eroded somewhat, and then new layers are put on top of it. So you have this distinction between the layers. I don't see how that can happen. That kind of distinction can happen in a flood where things are churning and moving. In a single flood.
How can rapidly moving water create gradation if it's depositing materials on top of other materials? How does gradation requires time? Let me explain why. One material becomes less available to the environment in that location over time, and another one becomes more available over time. But that's not what we see in the geologic column. These millions of strata going vertically, we see that one material comes to an abrupt end, just bam, stops. And then another material directly above it, and the difference sometimes in space between them is less than a millimeter, sometimes it's just a few millimeters. That's not gradation. That's not the one material blending into another. The blending, the gradation that you speak of, it's not present throughout the geologic column. It's one material ends, bam, abruptly another material begins. That would require time. Otherwise, you're believing that for some reason, it happened quadrillions of times that one material stopped being available for deposition in a given location, and another one instantly became available for deposition in that location. Why would that be geologically plausible if millions upon millions upon millions of rain events, for example, over millions of years is what built that strata? Did you understand the question? Do I need to make it simpler? If those materials were laid down by millions and millions of rain events that slowly moved materials, why would for some reason that fast, one material stop being available for deposition and another type of material become available for deposition in a flash if those strata were formed over millions of years? It's a tough question, I know. There really is no suitable answer from your camp. It can't be answered by your camp, but I would be interested in hearing you try.
Okay. So well, got a chance. As I was saying, I would need to get some citations and so on as to how the process actually works. Off my head, I'm not going to give you anything substantial on it, obviously. But as I said, you would have the deposition, and then you may have solidification and so on. Remember that the Earth actually churns and moves. You'd have where seas and so on would cover the land, and then they would go back, and then it would do the same thing again, and so on. That's how it happens. But again, I don't see how that happens during a flood, like a single flood event. It's actually harder to believe that happens during a single depositional event. Usually when you see that happens, the particles are sorted by density and size and so on, and it does meld together because again the flood is churning. Remember, a single flood event is churning all these materials. I'm not sure as to how they sort it in that way. I would love to see an experiment, at least on a large scale, not a little thing Kent uses, an experiment where we see at least some sort of a sorting like that.
Well, it's been done many, many times. I can show you dozens upon dozens of fluke experiments. Maybe you're not informed. Maybe you're not aware of it, but there have been many, many hydrologists and geology experiments in sedimentology that demonstrate exactly that very thing. What you're looking at is just one of dozens and dozens of experiments that have been performed over the last 40 or 50 years. And this is exactly what they produce. Rapidly moving water, which is littered with various materials mixed up in them, sorts them by grain size and density to create strata right before the scientist's eyes in fluke experiments. Numerous experiments like this, are performed. These experiments are all published in the science journals. And this is exactly what it's observed to take place when rapidly moving water is given a mix, a homogeneous mix of different materials. It automatically sorts them by particle size and grain size, that is, and by density to produce what you see on the screen. Strata, right before the scientist's eyes in real time on the fly. It takes minutes, sometimes seconds. You can actually see the angular conformity produced right there. Let me show you an angular conformity being produced on the fly, right there. You see these these angular lines? This is an angular conformity on small scale produced with horizontal strata produced right above it in real time in a laboratory on top of other materials. So I don't know where you're getting your ideas, but I'm not sure that's science, because science shows that rapidly moving water creates particle size distribution, lamina, and unconformities on the fly in seconds. It doesn't take millions of years. Where do you get the idea that there millions of years are necessary for this stuff to form? Because this is a feature of the entire geologic column going all the way down to Cambrian.
Okay. All right. So I got a chance to speak here. The fossil the layers in the geologic column, especially in the Grand Canyon where you can see a lot of them, they are not arranged by any kind of grain size or anything that you'd expect from a single depositional event. Again, I'm not too sure of the dynamics of. Don't interrupt me, Neff. Don't do that.
The strata are formed or organized by grain size.
Don't moderate that guy for me, please.
Go ahead.
Right. So, as I was saying, in the geo now you make me lost what I was saying. The Grand Canyon, the rocks are not assorted by grain size or anything. You would see sand layers at the bottom, and then you would see other types of rocks, and then you would see like sand again.
That's just not true. The entire geologic column is made that way.
At the bottom, for example, at the is it the supergroup or something? You would see at the bottom, dead at the bottom, you would see there are layers that were lifted at an angle and then cut off, right?
30 seconds.
Horizontally. Again, okay. Again, I would like to know what kind of flood dynamic can actually do that.
I think you're uninformed about the geologic column, because geologists acknowledge universally that throughout the entire geologic column of the Earth, the strata in the Earth, in general, not every strata, but in general, display particle size distribution throughout the entire geologic column. I don't know where you're getting your science from, but it's not the journals.
Go ahead, Stunted. Finish. 10 seconds.
Oh, well, Def would have to I'll get my citations. We would do just the Grand Canyon alone, and I think we can do a discussion on that maybe the next 2 weeks. I'll have to do some heavy reading. Yeah, I'm no geologist, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, I think you need to do some reading, a lot of it.
All right. Well, right. You guys can wrap it up in your closing coming up, but we're going to jump right into Standing Up for Truth and Snake. And I will start the time when the first words are spoken. 10 minutes. Go ahead, guys.
I definitely want to talk about speciation and the created heterozygosity hypothesis. One thing did jump out at me that Snake said at the end, where he accused Neff and I of not understanding simple geology. So as he knows, yes, there are several different ways that mountains can form. One of them, as you stated, Snake, was many mountains are actually formed a result of Earth's tectonic plates smashing together, right? And as we know, the Earth's crust is made up of multiple tectonic plates that still move today. No one's disagreeing with that. And all that's as a result of geologic activity, which is below the surface. So why do you think just stating that fact, I think I went a little more, detailed in regards to it, proves your uniformitarian pseudoscientific belief and understanding of the mountain ranges we see and everything we see in geology, Snake?
I don't think that proves it, just because we know how mountains are formed, but the order of fossils in the layers is pretty good evidence.
Well,
what
I
were
mean,
you
we're
saying
talking.
about created heterozygosity?
Well, we'll get to that. I want to press you on this, because if we take a specific case, for example, because you're the one that brought it up and accused us of not understanding geology, because I was looking to the catastrophic plate tectonics model, continental sprint, you would look to continental drift. But we're going to need meters per second continental sprint to explain what we see. For example, a specific case, the Appalachian Mountains on the northeastern seaboard of North America, the Uniformitarians believe that it took about 100 million years to completely form before plates then shifted into a different direction. But let me ask you, at the current rate of movement, which I believe is about 4 inches or 10 centimeters per year, the force and energy of the collision, let's say if we look at the Indian, Australian, or the Eurasian plates, so let's say the collision between those two plates, could they have been sufficient to push up the Himalayas?
The pressure between them?
Yeah. How can only if it's 4 inches per year, okay, at the current rate of movement, say if we're looking at the force and energy required between the Indian, Australian, and
You realize
Eurasian.
how heavy a continent of rock is, right? And if it's moving at 4 inches per year, that's a metric F ton of energy. If you
No, it's very questionable for you to say that with that force and energy that they could actually push up the Himalayas. It's like two cars colliding. If they're colliding or traveling at such a low speed, because if we look at the plate movements, if they're measured, as feet per second, like two cars each traveling at 62 miles per hour, that would be 100 kilometers an hour. The resulting catastrophic collision would have rapidly buckled rock strata to push up those high mountains. But your uniformitarian processes at only 4 inches per year can't push up the Himalayas. It's impossible.
They can and they do, and the equations support it, and all the
Where's your evidence that they do? Where's your evidence that they do?
Does geology support old Earth or young Earth?
No, don't divert. Don't divert. You're the one who brought up.
You know the answer to the question.
You guys didn't address my predictions that I provided. Tell me how 4 inches per year, that type of force and energy could push up the Himalayas. Are you just gonna say, well, the geologist can explain it? How is it possible?
How is it possible? Because you have an entire continent full of rock moving at that speed.
At only 4 inches per year, that type of force.
Yeah, you don't understand momentum.
Bring up the Himalayas. No, you're the one who doesn't understand it, because you've already been pressed by Jeremy on this, and your answers weren't.
Yeah, a continent moving at that speed is still a lot of energy.
No. You need meters per second.
It's enough to move. If the continent is moving, that's enough energy to move a continent. Next.
It's a pseudoscientific belief to say that with no actual evidence, when we've actually made a prediction based on continental sprint and it's come true. So at the end of the day, you can look to that, Snake, but it's not actually, because when we look at the geology of the Earth, present processes, as you're proving here, can't actually explain what we see, because rather what we see points to catastrophic processes in the past. That's confirmation of Noah's flood. That's the title of the debate.
Geologists debunked catastrophism a long time ago. So how are all these living things supposed to proliferate that quickly if evolution is false? If we can proliferate things, how come you can't answer my question about the small scale microevolutions adding up?
Well, your complaint. Well, first we're just.
Why isn't that possible?
First, we're going to acknowledge that question, since it's actually meters per second movement of the plates that could actually explain the geology of the mountains that we actually see. Catastrophic plate tectonics, not continental drift. That's pseudoscience. Now, created heterozygosity hypothesis, if we actually have these heterozygous ancestors, right, as you know, as I've explained before, if God created the original created kinds, Adam and Eve, with pre-existing functional DNA differences, an almost limitless variety of combinations of chromosomes, genes, and traits are possible. We've made predictions, okay? These predictions are coming true. The vast majority of our genome is functional. We don't need mutations to actually explain the changes, the micro changes as you talk about.
Yet they do
It's a
explain it.
recombination and gene conversion, and that's going to provide many new varieties of combination of traits quickly, since, as I've said, the
Mutations
differences are already built in.
all the time.
Well, what do you have against that model? Because that's what we see. We see a pre-existing functional DNA differences. You guys look to
Really, except that it's not observed. And even assuming that
I'll
model,
just give you a
the
testable prediction.
fossil transitions that we see in the fossil record are
Okay, so now you're jumping to fossil transitions. Why are you jumping around? Okay, so first let's acknowledge you failed on the catastrophic plate tectonics. Now you failed to give an objection to created heterozygosity hypothesis.
I'm
Now
gonna let you
you
just
want to go to transitional forms. You want to be 0 for 3 or you want to be 1 for 2?
So instead of just talking over me, maybe you can let me get out a few sentences.
Because I don't want you jumping around from topic to topic. We've talked about catastrophic plate tectonics in regards
Can
to
you give some moderation so I can speak?
So the problem with species.
Within that model of created heterozygosity, you can
What's
still
your
get all
objection?
the evolution that we see.
It's transitional.
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead. Tell me your objection to everything I just said. Go. Take as much time as you need.
Where were we? Within the model of created heterozygosity, the same fossil transitions that we see in the fossil record are still possible, such as the exact instance with whales that I gave.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your objection was, how can we get so many varieties of species after the flood? I've given you an answer based on created heterozygosity hypothesis. Now you're going to supposed whale transitionals. What is your objection to what I just said and my answer to your objection in regards to speciation post-flood? Adam and Eve were created with pre-existing functional DNA differences. We can see this because the majority of our genome is functional. Okay, so with amazing design and functional heterozygosity, even at a tiny fraction of their nucleotide snake, through the processes of gene conversion and recombination, an essentially unlimited range of useful diversity would be produced. What is your objection to that?
I've already stated that I don't really have an objection to that, other than it's absurd.
Okay, so
we see. I can't even get a sentence out, man.
Well, because that was your argument.
Hold on.
So you just admitted that I have an answer to it.
Hold on. I'm going to talk over you if you don't let me talk. So, within that model of having pre-created heterozygosity, you can still get all of the fossil transitions, such as the one that you won't answer. What is your objection to the addition of these small-scale transitions in the same population?
Because we don't actually see that. So for example, you seem to be confusing two things, okay? Adaptation to environments and evolution of higher life forms. Just a second, I'm answering your question. Created heterozygosity predicts change, adaptation. But at the end of the day, it doesn't take a genius to see that these are different issues, because the adaptation we look to, the change we look to, that can be accomplished by loss of information. That's exactly what we see.
Why are those
higher life form always requires a large increase in net information? We don't see that. We see the degradation. Can you point me to a beneficial mutation that actually adds new novel information as compared to degrades information? Because that's what you're going to need to take your fish to fishermen. Go ahead.
Yep, any mutation that creates a new protein, that's new information. And we've been over this over and over and over.
No, yeah, we've been over this over and over.
Changing its instructions.
We've seen no large scale. What's your best beneficial mutation that you can point to that
actually? We've been over this. You're changing the subjects. You don't have to answer. What is your objection to those small scale adaptations adding up in the same population?
I've already given you the objection.
No, you haven't given an objection to those specific ones. Why can't that happen theoretically?
Theoretically, it can't happen because what do we see? We see change that is down. We see loss of information, degradation of information, the breakdown of functional systems. That's not going to take your
observed all those changes.
Organism to a whale. Where's your
genetic entropy?
I don't want your ideas. I don't want your beliefs. I want your actual
genetic
evidence.
Entropy debunks your entire flood model because of the population bottlenecks seen after the arc. Those populations would go extinct within 100 generations. We've run the numbers at those population limits, and especially since inbreeding, because you only start with a single pair, genetic entropy would take over.
Misunderstanding of our model, okay? Because that bottleneck was short. Very little heterozygosity would have been lost. Your model, your bottleneck that you look to is prolonged. That would actually lead to the inbreeding and the That population would have been genetically compromised. What do we see? Low genetic diversity. Any two human beings on Earth are no more than 0.5% different. That proves we came from two people, Adam and Eve. You, my friend, you look to a bottleneck, and your bottleneck is what disproves your theory.